today you've got an opportunity to step up and to save it. Let me explain. Recently I recorded a video about the scholar's checkmate and how to stop it. I thought it's just a little useful piece of advice. Little did I know. It turned out that the problem is much bigger than I thought. The video quickly got views and it keeps gaining. It turned out that so many players are unknowingly going for the scholar's checkmate. In fact, here is one fun fact. I've checked the database and, for example, in this position, the move queen to f3 aiming for the scholar's checkmate is the second most popular move in this position. Can you believe that? This is ridiculous. Ahead in popularity compared to some normal moves such as knight c3 or d3, etc. So it is crazy that so many tricksters are still trying to go for the scholar's checkmate you and try to fool you in this, primitive stuff. So I've decided that we're going to stop it once and for all. And for that reason, we're going to be brutal today. The goal is not just to stop this, but to make your opponent regret their decision to play it against you, make them suffer, make them feel really upset about this idea so that they shift to some normal chess, okay? And if you're ready to be brutal today, let's go ahead and get started. You're probably aware of the scholar's checkmate, but just in case, here's a quick overview. This arises from the first king's pawn move, pawn e4, and when you respond pawn to e5, there are different obnoxious moves that your opponent can play against you, such as either bishop c4 first, or bring their queen out to either h5, or maybe to f3, and from there they're aiming in both cases to this vulnerable square on f7. So we're going to talk about all of those options and how you completely punish white for trying one of them. Okay, so let's say white goes queen h5, one of the common ways. Here they're hoping to snatch this pawn on e5 if you're careless, and if you defend it, they're playing their real stuff. Bishop to c4, aiming for the scholar's checkmate. Now and again, if you're careless and play something like knight f6, you get right into this scholar's checkmate, and that's definitely what you should avoid. Instead, black normally plays pawn g6, then white drops back their queen to f3, renewing the checkmating threat once again. And here, the right way is knight to f6. At this point, white is at the crossroad. They may keep playing aggressively, trying to beat you quickly within a couple moves with different little tricks, or they may switch back to kind of normal chess, saying, okay, this didn't work out, but still I have this active queen along this file, and maybe I'm gonna play something like d3, bishop g5, put this pin, and just transition into a more normal chess attack. Again, in both cases, I'll show you really effective solutions. But let's start off with the most aggressive options of white. Those tricksters often will go for these most aggressive moves. One of them is pawn g4. White is relentless in their pursuit of the scholar's checkmate. They want to play g5, drive this knight away, and still play queen takes f7. What are you going to do in this case? Well, the first thing is we don't really want to defend, because white's attack is unsound and we want to punish white, we want to counterattack. Of course, you got to be careful because, if somehow you move this knight away, indeed you can be checkmated. Therefore, you need to watch over this queen and where it can go. But basically, we do not want to defend, we want to counterattack. And you achieve that here with the move knight to d4. So instead of dealing with this threat, we start our counterattack. We attack the queen over here, as well as this pawn on c2, which is really bad for white because from there, the knight is going to fork the king and the rook, which forces white's queen to go all the way back to d1 probably, and at this point you could just take this pawn on e4, but again, we're going to be brutal, so one pawn is not enough. We're going to play pawn d5, attacking this bishop, but also opening up our own bishop so that it can get involved into our attack with no additional time. And after pawn takes here, now the bishop comes out to g4, hitting the queen once again. And at this point, white may regret their decision to try the scholar's checkmate against you, but now it is too late. What can they really do? They gotta cover their queen somehow. Doing this with a knight really doesn't work, because if knight to f3 check to the king and king f1 leads to a pretty nice checkmate delivered by just a bishop and a knight. So that's definitely not the solution for white, and usually they don't play this. Instead, let's take a couple moves back. Here they usually play pawn f3, hoping to gain in tempo by attacking your bishop. But you play another nice move, knight to e4. At first it may seem like there's some weird challenge to put as many minor pieces on the first rank as you can, but it's not the case. Knight e4 actually aims to continue your attack, okay? So first of all, they cannot take it, because then that'll expose their queen and you'll grab it. But what if they grab the bishop? In this case, well, you play queen h4. That was actually the intent of moving your knight. So that clears the path for the queen. And now queen h4 checks the king. It has to go to f1 and then queen to f2. Rephrasing an ancient saying, those who use the scholar's checkmate will die by the scholar's checkmate. Another aggressive attempt of white in this critical position of the scholar's checkmate is to move queen to b3, kind of in style of white dancing around with their queen, desperately trying to get to this pawn on f7 and get you in trouble. Most players here play queen to e7 trying to defend the pawn, but instead there is a move which is a lot more aggressive and of course a lot stronger. It actually wins the game right away. It's the move knight to d4. Once again we counterattack the queen with the same move knight to d4, and similarly the knight here hits the pawn on c2 as well, therefore the queen can't go far away anyway. Now, anyway, while I will be happy to grab the pawn because that's what was the aim of their last move, and our king goes to e7, now white's in trouble actually, because the queen has to maintain the guard of this bishop, if not it's going to be captured by the king, but also it's going to keep maintaining the guard of this pawn. The only normal move is queen to c4, but then you play b5 to drive this queen away, and in most cases they do play queen to c5, but actually white is lost anyway, and after queen to c5, you could just take the bishop, but since we decided to be brutal and to make white suffer, I recommend the other move, pawn d6. Instead of just grabbing the bishop, we're hunting for a bigger fish, we want to grab the queen. Because notice that there aren't that many squares for the queen to go to. Also, if it goes away somewhere to, b4 or a3, you can always grab over here, delivering a check to the king and attacking the queen. Therefore, all the squares from c2 are basically unavailable for the queen. So let's take it back. That's why they're going to play queen to c3, at least trying to defend the pawn. And again, you could take the bishop, but we instead play knight takes c4. We keep the hunt of the queen. And, again, your knights, as well as the bishop from h3, control pretty much all the squares around. So they're going to play queen to d3. You still play knight c5. You keep attacking the queen. It looks like the variation is long, but basically we keep attacking the queen all the time, and therefore it's easy to find those moves. Queen goes to b4, c3. Now we go pawn b4. Attacking it once again, and it still has to maintain the guard of this pawn, so queen c4 is forced. Now bishop a6, we keep chasing the queen, queen d5 is the only square available, and then we lock the door with the move pawn to c6, and now, funnily enough, the queen is trapped in the middle of the board, right on d5. And I think that's a really great punishment for white, so that they realize that just dancing around with their queen in opening is a bad strategy, and so now we just win it. Besides these two aggressive options of white that we just analyzed, white can also shift the gear and try to go into a more normal chess with something like d3 or c3 or knight e2. And I recorded that video just not long ago where I covered all these variations and how you can beat white in that case. Therefore, I recommend that you check it out later. And for now, let me show you another version of the scholar's checkmate that often used by stronger opponents. At this position, instead of playing queen h5, which is a more beginner level attempt, many of the stronger level opponents will start off with the move bishop c4, pretending like they're playing normal chess. And then regardless of whether you play knight f6 or knight c6 or basically any other move, let's say knight to c6, they play queen to f3. Hoping for a couple things. The first thing is that you could pre-move your next move, something like bishop c5, and then they'll just deliver this queen takes f7 checkmate. Also, their another hope is that after you, let's say, play knight f6, once again, they can try to shift to a kind of more normal chess. They tried out this quick trap against you, didn't work out. They say, okay, let me try some normal chess now and a little bit postpone my attack. And so instead, in this position, they play something like pawn c3 to cover this square d4. They're aware of your knight aiming to the square, so they cover that. And as I said, stronger level opponents sometimes play that, aiming for, some d3 and bishop g5 in the future and develop their attack a little bit later. In this position, of course, usually people just play normal developing chess, but our goal is to punish white, right? So we're going to play aggressively. And one of the common classical chess rules says that you got a counter strike in the center when your opponent plays some weird attack on the side. And we're going to do just that with the move pawn d5, which is another common attacking pattern here for black to start their counter attack. White captures, and you can now recapture right now because this pawn is defended twice. Therefore, if you capture it, you just lose the knight. But if you instead counter attack with the move pawn e4, counterattack the queen, forcing it to move. And in most cases, white plays the wrong move queen e3, but you have really nice attacking game in any case. Let's say queen goes to e3, and now again, instead of just taking the pawn, because in that case you lose this pawn on e4, you could instead move this knight to e5. Once again, you keep attacking with your every move. This time we're attacking the bishop, and as it goes back, they usually play bishop to b3. Then your knight can happily land on d3, putting white's king in trouble, so we already managed to turn the table around, and now you are attacking the king as well as the bishop on c1. Therefore, they move their king to d1, but now you can bring out your bishop with a tempo, hitting the queen, as well as indirectly, hitting this pawn on f2, so basically you are already winning. And after queen goes to g3, you could of course just play knight takes f2, winning this pawn, but instead there is a stronger move, and I want to challenge you to find it on your own. So let this be a puzzle of the day. It is black to play and win. What is another move besides knight takes f2 that can win the game for black? If you can find it, please write it down in the comments below. We've just analyzed the move pawn to c3, where you counter-strike with the move pawn d5, and then you unleash your attack against white. The second most popular option for white is playing pawn d3, opening up for the bishop to go there to g5, trying to continue putting pressure on you. But in this case, the d4 square is available, so we happily land our knight there, forcing the queen to go back because it has to now defend also this weakness on c2, and therefore we push the queen all the way back to d1. Now we play our typical move pawn d5. If you can play it, basically you're happy, you already got the initiative. Now pawn takes, and there are different ways to go about this, but I recommend a simple approach just to take the pawn so that you don't, mess up with anything else. Just take it and your position is nice. Usually they're annoyed by your too strong knight, so they play pawn c3, and you move your knight back, and here guess what they play? Yes, they once again play the same trick, queen to f3. They're trying for the same scholar's checkmate twice within the same game. Insane. They're attacking the knight, hoping that you're going to move it somewhere here, and then they'll play queen takes f7 checkmate. Of course, we aren't going to do that. Instead, you're going to play normal move bishop e6, defending the knight, and your position is perfectly fine. But then they play again a tricky move knight to h3. This time they're aiming for knight to g5, and from here they're going to put more pressure on these weaknesses as well as on knight on d5 indirectly. So we stop it with a simple pawn to h6. Now they cannot find any attacking moves anymore, and therefore they just castle. Now, most players who play this as black play some normal development moves such as bishop to e7, and that is fine. But again, our goal is not just to play normal chess, right? We're going to be merciless and punish white for their wrong playing and opening. So we're going to play a bold move pawn to g5. Our goal is to play pawn g4, which is a double attack to the queen and the knight. And by the way, even if there is no queen there on f3, g4 traps the knight anyway because it has nowhere to go. Therefore, basically white is defenseless. They cannot do anything against this simple threat, and then we grab the knight. They do try their last trick, queen h5, which pins this pawn, and so they hope for some knight takes g5 stuff anyway. But again, you just got to be careful, always watch over this queen and what white aims to do. So we do play knight f6 and kick it away. White is forced to go back now, and then we finally play pawn g4 anyway, and we reached our goal. The knight is trapped. White can't trade off the bishops, it doesn't change anything, the knight is still trapped. It may look like your king is a little bit exposed, but that's not a problem actually, because we're gonna grab this knight, and white actually still has just a single queen in the game, and they cannot possibly checkmate you with just a single queen. And your king is actually well surrounded by lots of defenders, right? So you aren't gonna worry about that. Moreover, after you grab the knight over here, you're actually gonna attack yourself along the g file.